All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I've been called a lot of names in my life. Tammy, Lieutenant Colonel, Senator, and other names that I can't mention in mixed company. But I have to say, Mommy, though, is probably, without a doubt, my favorite name. It's the one my 5-year-old uses when she runs into the house after dance class and poos on my sleeve, eager to show me what she learned during her lesson. It's the one my 9-year-old says when she announces her latest idea of what she wants to be when she grows up. Right now, she's leaning towards becoming an Army cyber warrior. Never a helicopter pilot. I don't know why. My girls are my everything, but I likely would not have ever been able to have them had I not had access to basic reproductive rights that Americans, up until recently, had been depending on for decades. Because after a decade of struggle with infertility post my service in Iraq, I was only able to get pregnant through IVF. IVF is the reason that I've gotten to experience the chaos and beauty, the stress and the joy that is motherhood. IVF is the reason that my husband and I aren't just Tammy and Brian, we're mom and dad, which sounds much better when they say it than I do. But for countless hopeful parents, that desperately sought after dream of becoming a parent just became so much harder. Last week, Alabama's Supreme Court ruled that frozen embryos created through IVF should be considered children under state law, a ruling based on extreme ideology rather than on medical science, and one that throws IVF access into chaos for countless women as they and their doctors try to figure out whether they might be criminalized for simply trying to start a family. If you're thinking that this makes no sense, you're right. The very people who claim to be defending family values are actively trying to enact policies that would actually prevent Americans from creating those families. IVF providers around the state in Alabama have already paused treatment out of fear that their doctors and patients could be criminally punished. And now that the first domino has fallen, it may only be a matter of time before more hospitals make the same call, before more courts issue similar rulings putting more women at risk. You know, I was stationed in Alabama for a bit when I was in the Army. In fact, it's the home of Fort Noversell, the home of Army aviation. I didn't know it at the time, but my infertility would become one of the most heartbreaking struggles of my life. My miscarriage more painful than any wound I ever earned on the battlefield. So it's a little personal to me when a majority male court suggests that people like me who are not able to have kids without the help of modern medicine should be in jail cells and not taking care of their babies in nurseries. I know I'm not alone when I struggle to understand how politicians who support this kind of policy can possibly call themselves pro-life. After Roe v. Wade was overturned, actually even before then, when Donald Trump promised to only appoint justices who would overturn it, I warned that red states would come for IVF, and now they have. But they aren't just going to stop in Alabama. Mark my words, if we don't act now, it will only get worse. That's why tomorrow I'm headed to the Senate floor to call on my colleagues to pass, via unanimous consent, my Access to Family Building Act, which would ensure that every American's right to become a parent via treatments like IVF is fully protected, regardless of what state they live in, guaranteeing that no hopeful parent or doctor is punished. We face a lot of tough calls as senators. This just isn't one of them. 1 in 4 married women have difficulty getting pregnant or carrying a pregnancy to term. 1 in 4. That doesn't even include single women, single individuals, and other families also trying to conceive. So to my Republican colleagues, please think about how many that 1 in 4 represents in your state. Women willing to go through expensive, painful treatments just for a chance to experience the most banal moments of parenthood. Just to have a newborn to swaddle, a toddler whose shoes need to be tied. And if you believe that they should have the right to be called mom without also being called a criminal, then all you have to do to prove it is help us pass this should be obvious legislation. Because in this nightmarish moment, it's nowhere near enough to send out a vaguely worded tweet suggesting that you care about women's rights, despite a voting record to the absolute contrary. No, instead, if you truly care about the sanctity of families, if you're genuinely, actually, honestly interested in protecting IVF, then you need to show it by not blocking this bill on the floor tomorrow. It's that simple. Thank you. Now I'll be followed by the Majority Leader, Schumer. Thank you for being here, Chuck.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Tammy, for those both piercing and poignant words. There's no one better who can understand what this right-wing MAGA Republican movement is trying to do to women than Tammy Baldwin. Well, then Tammy Baldwin, but even and Tammy Duckworth. But thank you. Those were really beautiful words. In some Republican now, why are we here? We're here first to thank Senator Duckworth for putting this important presser together and moving her legislation tomorrow. We're here because all Americans all across the country are just outraged and revolted by the radical attack on IVF and fertility care we saw in Alabama last week. The opinion from the Alabama Supreme Court will cause untold damage to women, families, and doctors. It's heartbreaking, it's enraging, both at once. And while this is a stunning decision, as Senator Duckworth has said it is, it's not completely surprising. This didn't happen in a vacuum. What happened in Alabama, make no mistake about it, is a direct consequence of the hard-right MAGA Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. And as sure as we're standing here, there are going to be other awful decisions that emanate from this overturning of Roe v. Wade in the future. Thanks to MAGA extremism and the hard-right judges, the extremist judges, that former President Trump and the Republican Senate put on the courts, today the United States is an embarrassment to the world when it comes to reproductive freedom. Here in the 21st century, we live in a country where women have to travel hundreds of miles just for basic health care. In some Republican state legislators, politicians are trying to police women's movements and control. Doctors now fear criminal prosecutions just for doing their jobs and for obeying the Hippocratic Oath. And families who want to get pregnant now have to worry that even in vitro fertilization will be taken away from them. There are so many countless people we all know who have the joy of children because of IVF. Because of IVF. So, as I said, it's heartbreaking. It's enraging. And Republicans know it. They know it. They're like the dog who caught the bus. They play ball with these hard-right ideologues, and then they even though they back all these other movements, including repealing Roe, they're now desperately backpedaling over the last few days because they see what they have done. These Republicans are like the arsonist who set a house on fire and then said, "Why is it burning?" But let us be very clear. Republicans who have spent decades packing our courts with hard-right judges and who have called for national abortion bans deserve zero benefit of the doubt now that the consequences of their agenda are sinking in and even spreading. The shameful state of women's health care and women's health care freedoms is a direct product of hard-right Republican agenda, which too many other Republicans have gone along with lock, stock, and barrel. Republicans own what happened in Alabama. Republicans own the disasters that emanate from Roe v. Wade. And Democrats are absolutely committed to doing everything we can to protect women, families, reproductive freedom. Republicans will learn when it comes to attacks on personal freedoms, the American people do not easily forget. Thank you, and I have to go open up the floor, or I would want to listen to your remarks.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. First of all, thank you to Senator Duckworth, who's been such a champion on this issue, and for your amazing words this morning. You know, ever since IVF access in Alabama was thrown into jeopardy by Republicans' extreme ideology, women have been sharing the most heartbreaking stories about how their dreams of becoming a mother have been turned into a complete nightmare. Imagine going through years of trying to get pregnant to no avail, maybe going through the heartbreak of a miscarriage, often multiple times, and then turning, hopefully, to IVF, paying thousands, often tens of thousands of dollars, taking your shots, allowing yourself to hope maybe this time, only to have some right-wing judge pull the rug out from under you. because they believe a frozen embryo kept in storage at an IVF clinic is the same and should have the same exact rights as a living, breathing human person. Because they want everything that's happening in doctors' offices and fertility clinics to conform to their extreme ideology, one that would make services like IVF impossible. My heart truly goes out to all the women in Alabama who are suffering right now. And let's get one thing straight. Republicans cannot pretend this is some surprise. Republicans fought for decades to overturn Roe, knowing full well it would create situations like this. Democrats have been warning about this for years. It's been incredible to watch Republicans now scramble over the weekend to suddenly support IVF, while many of these same Republicans are literally, right now, co-sponsors of legislation that would enshrine fetal personhood, the very concept that caused all of the chaos in Alabama and would make IVF unavailable nationwide. You cannot support IVF and support fetal personhood laws. They are fundamentally incompatible. You are not fooling anyone. Women aren't just going to forget who is responsible for this, who ripped away their dreams of building their families. This is what happens when Republican politicians take away women's power over their own bodies. This is not hyperbole. This is not hypothetical. This is happening. If Republicans seriously want to help fix the chaos and devastation they have worked so hard to create, they can help us restore the rights enshrined in Roe, which they overturned to make all this possible, and they can help us pass legislation to protect and expand IVF care. And our bill, the Access to Family Building Act, is a great place to start. It just does not get more straightforward than this. If Republicans seriously support the right to build families through IVF, they can prove it tomorrow on the floor. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody, and I want to thank Senator Duckworth for bringing us all together today. Since Roe was overturned a year and a half ago, it seems that we've come together countless times to say the same thing: leave women alone. Unfortunately, Republicans don't seem to get that message. When Dobbs was decided, millions of women were stripped of their reproductive rights. At that time, Republicans said we were being alarmist when we said the ramifications of this decision would go far beyond abortion care. They said we were being dramatic when we raised that birth control might be on the chopping block. They said that we were overreacting when I fought to pass the Respect for Marriage Act to protect same-sex and interracial couples. And they said that we had nothing to worry about when we insisted the right to IVF was in jeopardy. Now we know we were right to ring the alarm. Exactly what we have been warning about has sadly become reality for millions, and the consequences are nothing short of dire. Millions of women have been stripped of their rights and become second-class citizens. In my home state of Wisconsin, I heard stories of women bleeding out from incomplete miscarriages or being forced to travel across state lines for basic care. Across this country, we have seen doctors leaving their home states to practice where they can do their jobs without interference from politicians, leaving women in already underserved areas with fewer options for basic care. And now in Alabama, women who desperately want to start a family are being told they do not have the right to make that decision. Think about that, undergoing intensive, sometimes painful procedures and potentially spending your life savings just to be told that you're no longer in control because some judges said so. Make no mistake, Roe being overturned paved the road for this decision. In recent days, I have seen people from across the political spectrum claim to support this essential family planning tool. This is welcome news, especially coming from some of the 125 congressional Republicans who co-sponsored legislation that could ban IVF. Well, now the rubber meets the road. Congress has a chance to show if they think that every family should have the freedom to decide when and how to build their family. I know where I stand. I support women's and families' rights to control their destiny without interference from the government or politicians. Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you. Well done. Well said. Thank you, everyone. It's great to be up here with these women. I was standing here now that Chuck's left, and thinking about what a difference it's made to have voices of people that actually have experienced things like IVF, know what a difference it's made in their lives. And that was lost for a long time. And sadly, we have Republicans right now that don't just want to bring us back to the 1950s, they want to bring us back to the 1850s. I love the name of this bill because this is about family building. And it is on the other side with this decision in Alabama, just an example of the chaos and cruelty that has been unleashed since Roe v. Wade was overturned. It's in that opinion, it's the basis for that opinion, and first they interfered with the woman's right to make her own decisions about ending a pregnancy. And now they're trying to interfere with a woman's right to choose whether to start a family. That's what this is about. The ruling from the Alabama Supreme Court threatens access to IVF for those who want to build, to start, to grow a family. And yes, it is an interpretation by this Alabama court with judges very similar to the judges that Donald Trump put on the courts across this land. But it can, as my colleagues have pointed out, affect everyone, and its basis is the overturning of Roe v. Wade. IVF is a miracle for millions of families who couldn't otherwise have children. And no politician, no court should be able to interfere with that. I come from a state that believes in science, the home of Mayo Clinic, the home of University of Minnesota. We believe in science, and we believe that science can be used for good to help people. How has this helped people? Over the last 40 years, over 8 million children have been born with the help of IVF. But the Republicans now, they are not backing down. Are they trying to hide? Oh, yeah, I've seen them running through the hallways when you guys try to ask them about this. Yeah, but they are doubling down. Right now in the House, as Tammy Baldwin just pointed out, there are 125 Republicans, including the Speaker, sponsoring a bill that would jeopardize IVF, along with, of course, almost all abortions. And whatever backpedaling Donald Trump and other Republicans are doing, let's be clear, this happened because he stacked the court with extreme judges. In the Senate, I am proud to co-sponsor Tammy Duckworth's bill. It is time to enshrine the right of people to build their own families. And again, we welcome them to vote with us to make this clear. If they want to make it clear, they got a chance tomorrow.
Okay, we have time for some of your questions. Thank you. Yes.
Do you think there's anything in the bill that this Republicans will have an issue with, and have you heard any support from them recently?
I have not heard anything from them. It's been crickets. For all the Republicans who suddenly claim that they support IVF, it's been crickets. All the bill does is establishes a statutory right for for people to access assistive reproductive technology.
So you haven't gotten an indication then on the other side that Republicans are intending to block this when you bring it up for it?
No indications. The House companion has one Republican co-sponsor who's actively asking to be removed from it. Yes.
Have you spoken with Senator Hyde-Smith at all, or do you plan to? I believe last time you requested UC on this bill, she's the Republican
Yes.
who blocked it.
No, I have not spoken to her.
Do you plan to?
Nope. Hopefully she won't show up tomorrow to block it once again.
Do you expect for Republicans to block it?
Well, I expect them to, if they live up to the words that they're saying, to not block it. But we'll see tomorrow when the rubber hits the road whether they actually show up and show support for IVF or whether they actively block American families for ability to start families through IVF. Yeah.
If it is blocked tomorrow, do you hope to schedule a roll call vote on this? And what's the thinking?
I would love a roll call vote. Let's get them on the record. Let me just make it clear. This is a logical end to where we are with the start by Republicans who have come after reproductive rights. I've been talking about this since 2018 when Justice Kavanaugh was going through his confirmation process.
I remember that.
And yeah, and I was told I was being alarmist and that this was hypothetical. Amy Coney Barrett supported St. Joseph County right to life, and I brought it up that they have said that they oppose IVF, and I was called alarmist and that this was hypothetical. That will never happen. Don't just listen to my Republican colleagues. Listen to the people that they support. Texas Right to Life, that wrote the Texas bounty laws, anti-choice bounty laws, have said that they do not support IVF, and that and their leadership has said that they want control of the embryos. And on their webpage, they say that the only way that they can be neutral on IVF is if you implant every single embryo that is created. I had 5 embryos that were created. 3 were deemed to be non-viable, would not survive. In 2013, my doctor said to me, you know, if these personhood laws actually proceed, I could be convicted of manslaughter or murder for discarding these 3 eggs that were non-viable. You're going to force women, in the best case scenario, to implant those non-viable eggs, but it's even worse than that. We're at a point now where women are bleeding out, as Baldwin said, women are bleeding out in hospital emergency room parking lots because doctors are so afraid to treat women because of these laws that they say, oh, sorry, there is no exception for life of the mother unless you're almost dead. Just bleed out for a few more hours and then I can take care of you. So why are we surprised that we're at a point now where doctors are saying, I can't do this anymore because I could be convicted of manslaughter? That is the next logical step. They've been telling us this for decades. Donald Trump suddenly supports IVF after crowing and claiming and taking credit for the fall of Roe v. Wade. You can't do both. It's hypocritical. And so let's find out tomorrow if any Republicans show up to block the unanimous consent. Yeah.
I have a question for Patty Murray.
Sure.
Your partner on the Appropriations Committee, Susan Collins, was asked about this IVF decision yesterday, and one of the things she suggested was a vote on the Reproductive Freedom for All Act, which was the bill co-sponsored by Tim Kaine, Lisa Murkowski, Kirsten Sinema, Susan Collins. It doesn't go as far as the Women's Health Protection Act, but would you support a vote on Reproductive Freedom for All Act as a possible solution?
I haven't seen the latest draft of that, but I will say this. We have a bill that is strong, that returns Roe v. Wade as the law of the land. I support that adamantly, and I believe we need to pass that.
If you don't succeed tomorrow, has Leader Schumer said that he would go through the procedural hoops to get to the roll call vote that you said you would?
I'm going to answer that. Look, we all know how much we have to do in the Senate right now to get the appropriations bills passed so that government doesn't shut down. We've got tremendous amount of work. We're just starting next year's bills to get all that done. We have a lot of work here in the Senate. There is no reason to take hours on end, days on end to pass this legislation. And that's what it would take, because we know the same people who are going to block a UC are going to use every procedural move to not let it pass. That means several weeks, if not more, on the Senate floor to get that bill done. There is no reason to use all that time. If Republicans are now saying that they support IVF, don't block it tomorrow, let it pass. We know this in the Senate. If there is an urgent crisis in this country, we can do a UC and get it done. That's what should happen tomorrow.
Mentioned that Republicans have not reached out to you on this bill. Are there specific Republicans you can identify that you have reached out and said, will you come on board with this?
I've said this over the years, and they've all said no so far. So we're not at the point of co-sponsoring. We're at the point of let's have this vote tomorrow. Let's have the unanimous consent, and we'll get it passed. Yeah.
Pro-life groups have said that there need to be limits for what happens with the embryos. Is there room for middle ground between you and Republicans?
You can't get there. I'm not accepting that. Pro-life groups have said that a fertilized egg has more rights than the woman that's going to carry that fertilized egg. There's no compatibility with this. There's no way to say that there's limits on embryos. Texas Right to Life says that they want every egg implanted, every fertilized egg implanted. That's not viable. Do you know what it costs each time? And you're going to force a woman to go through a miscarriage by implanting non-viable embryos? That's what you want to do? When you know that it's going to fail? that's what you want to do, you're going to punish women further, women who are struggling, who scrape together everything they've had in order to go through these procedures. And you say, okay, we know that those three, in my case, we know that those 3 embryos are non-viable, but you're going to have to, if you want IVF, you're going to have to implant them and go through 3 miscarriages. Is that what we're going to do to women? This is the logical end step of where we are when you declare a fertilized egg as having more rights than a living, breathing human being. So no, I reject those attempts because that is just a way, it's a bait and switch, and it's not viable. You can't get there.
I just add one more thing on
go
this
ahead.
front, just because the other point that needs to be made is the relationship with what's been happening with reproductive freedom overall. We're losing OBGYNs. And so if that is to help when someone's pregnant, that is to deal with emergency surgery and the like, 1/3 of women right now are living in states. 1/3 of women are in states where they banned abortion. OBGYNs don't know if they're going to be criminally prosecuted. In Minnesota, they've had to, some of them they had to close down a clinic in North Dakota and move it to Minnesota. We're seeing this all over the country. So it's become certain states, they're trying to move there. They maybe can't move there because they've got another job. So it's not only this Dobbs decision and the overturning of this fundamental right has affected everyone in any way for women that want to seek reproductive health care. And so it is every step of the way.
Go ahead.
What are you hoping to hear from the president on this issue in the State of the Union?
Well, the president has been very clear, whether or not he says it in the State of the Union. He supports women's decisions to make their own decisions about their reproductive health care. There's been nobody stronger than Joe Biden when it comes to supporting women's access to reproductive health care, and I expect that he will continue to have to take that stance, whether or not he mentions it in the State of the Union. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Great job. Good job.
Thank you. Thanks, ladies.
Okay.